Good morning. Doing a little history lesson today on parts of the Roman Empire that became very strong during the reign of Caesar Augustus. So this is going to be chapter 10 in your history reader. So we'll be reading from the book that is in Bright Thinker. But before we get to that, I've got a little background information about life in the Roman Empire, once again, especially at about the time that Caesar Augustus was reigning. So a Roman city typically had a forum. Now, a forum was a central marketplace or public square that contained some shops and government buildings, like law courts and temples for the main gods and goddesses. In addition to being the center of some commercial activity, the forum was also the center for civic participation for a city. So where they would participate in specific events that had to do with the way the city ran as a whole. Now, a city usually had several temples built in honor of a variety of gods and goddesses. Now, cities also had a lot of times some public bathhouses, which featured some hot pools and cold pools, depending on what they needed, some exercise grounds and gardens. The baths, like the houses of the rich, actually had running water, which was unusual for this time. Most people, though, they had to get their water from public fountains on the street. But what is unusual at this time was that there was water that came right to a building. But most people had to go to a public area that still did have these aqueducts that brought the water to them. Most people lived in crowded, noisy dwellings similar to what apartment buildings would be like today. So that's for the normal plebeians, that they would live in an area like that, or for the slaves possibly. Of possibly 4 or 5 stories, although the wealthy, they lived in what were called villas. They were attended to by slaves. Slavery was common among the Romans, and most of the slaves were actually people who were captured in battle from a different country. Some of the favorite forms of entertainment that became popular during the reign of Caesar Augustus were gladiator combats, wild animal contests, and chariot races. Many gladiators were professionally trained slaves who fought each other, often to death. However, if a gladiator made a particularly skillful showing, the crowd might cheer for his release. Also, sometimes gladiators would actually fight wild animals rather than each other. It's very sad, regardless, that they were basically brought in without any chance, or with a very slim chance of ever escaping, whether dead or freed. However, it was done just for the entertainment and amusement of the people who lived in Rome and had enough money to come to these events. Now, in Rome, the Colosseum was a huge arena that seated about 45,000 people. So similar to the size of like a big basketball arena or football stadium. Chariot races were another event that were held in round or oval structures that were called circuses, strangely enough. That's where they would actually have chariot races. Spectators sat in tiers around the sides and cheered on their teams. There was one specific arena called Circus Maximus that was the largest in the whole empire. The phrase bread and circuses refers to the practice of getting grain and providing grains and grain and games to the poor of the cities to keep them fed and happy so that they wouldn't revolt against the city as a whole. So it's basically trying to keep them happy with some cheap entertainment so that they don't revolt against the city. Now, the massive Colosseum and Circus Maximus are typical of the Roman skill at engineering, which we'll see pictures of in a moment. The Romans used domes to cap their buildings and arches to support walls and ceilings. Arches supported Roman bridges and aqueducts, which were the stone structures that carried water from the country into and throughout the cities. The Romans also used stone to pave their roads, as we've seen last week, and they laid those throughout the entire empire. Many modern European roads are based on the old Roman road beds, and some aqueducts are still standing even. So let's look at our book now to see some pictures of these things that were just described. So roads, bridges, and aqueducts. You've seen a little about the construction of these roads, but we'll see that in more detail, along with bridges and aqueducts, which were really groundbreaking for this time. Now, just a little background information, or not background information, but this is a little side story that we've seen at times about this little Roman boy. One morning in 100 CE, which is 100 years after the birth of Jesus Christ, that is in this next generation, the time of Caesar Augustus, a Roman patrician named Marcus heard the slap of small sandals on the stone floor of his villa. Marcus wondered which of his children was up so early. The slapping sound grew louder. Then Marcus saw Linus, his 7-year-old son, carrying a great armload of scrolls. At that moment, the footsteps were interrupted by an awful crash. Then came the sound of heavy scrolls bouncing and rolling on the smooth stone floor. Marcus hurried into the hall. Linus was trying to gather up the scrolls, and Lucia, Linus's 11-year-old sister, was shaking her head and scolding her brother. This is what a scroll looks like. How many of you have seen a scroll, whether in real life or a picture of one? This is what they had, and it was still wealthy people who had this, but as a replacement for books, since they could not have books produced like we have today without a printing press. So I'll try my best to pronounce this. It might be, and some of you might do a better job at this, Gaudiamus igitur uvenis dum sumus. What do you think that means? This one means, let us therefore rejoice while we are young. Let us therefore rejoice while we are young. It says that the Romans used scrolls to record written information, and this saying is written on that scroll. So, little boy's carrying his armload of scrolls. He says, now you've woken father. Oh, this is his sister. Now you've woken father. Why can't you be careful? Next, you will wake grandfather. She was right. Grandfather was awake, and he had a message for his grandson. You won't find answers in those scrolls, boy. You and your sister have a lot to learn. You won't learn it crawling around my villa in the dark. Tell Nikos, your teacher, that we are going to Rome. But first, I'll have a word with your father. Marcus smiled at his father as the older man led them outside. Marcus, my grandchildren have been in the countryside too long. I have asked them some questions yesterday. They almost knew nothing about Rome. They've never even seen an aqueduct. He's in shock. It is time they learned. As head of the family, I'm going to see to it. They will be in my traveling school beginning today. So this grandfather wants his grandchildren to truly understand what makes Rome great, including aqueducts that they don't even know about. Now, Marcus was grateful to his father, who was a Roman senator. Linus and Lucia were getting a wonderful gift. Linus and Lucia climbed aboard a large wagon. Nikos, the teacher, was next. They were followed by 2 servants who would cook meals and care for the horses. The senators wore a purple-trimmed toga and rode a beautiful black horse. He waved goodbye to Marcus and rode away, followed by his guards and the heavy wagon. Now we're going to hear about each of these significant parts of Roman life in the city. Linus and Lucia, you are going to learn how to build a road. Do any of your grandparents or parents want you to learn something like with your hands, using a tool, or building something that maybe they knew how to do and they are surprised that you don't know how to do this? He says, climb down, we'll walk from here. The group walked through a cloud of dust in the distance. As they neared the dust cloud, they saw hundreds of men digging and carrying stones. Their grandfather explained. First, these men dig a trench. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time focusing today. I need some coffee, I think. First, these men dig a trench, which is this hollowed out part of the earth. They fill the trench with large stones and with gravel. Gravel are little tiny stones. Probably many of you have seen gravel roads before. Then they lay down surface slabs of stone to make the road's surface. They also make the road a little higher in the middle. That way the rain will flow off of it. It's very, very smart. So let's see. Oh, actually, I'll find a picture of that Roman road later, but it's this hollowed out trench filled with big stones and then little bitty stones, and then the tile at the top, or the stones at the top that are longer slabs that are rounded up here so that the rain would just flow right off. Nikos will show you a map of the Roman roads, which connect all the Roman provinces. These fine roads are one of our most valuable treasures. Next, grandfather continued, we're going to see where this road is going. We will have a good view from that hilltop. The view was very good indeed. The road was headed across a broad valley toward a wide river. Hundreds of men were building a bridge across the river. Again, the senator explained how it was done. First, they line 2 boats up side by side. Then they build a wooden platform across them. They add more boats and make the platform longer and longer until it stretches all the way across the river. When the long platform is finished, they build underwater pillars, and these support the bridge. So can you imagine side-by-side boats? And they're laying this platform all the way across, and then they start working down, having a pillar that's going into the water. Now, a pillar, as you can see here, is a tall, solid support post. So this post holds up the top part of the bridge. How do they build the pillars? The children asked. He says, they pound a wooden stake into the bottom of the river. And that type of stake is a thin pointed post. So it has a point on one end so that it actually can stick into the earth. So they start with that stake that goes into the bottom of the river so that it's solid, it's going to be firm there. Then they put another stake next to it and another until they've made a circle of stakes. They pull chains around the stakes to make the circle very tight. That way, no water can leak in between the stakes. When the chains are tight, they empty out the water inside the circle. Then they build a stone pillar inside the circle of stakes. These are wooden stakes, and then they fill it the stone pillar. They build all the pillars the same height. Then they connect them with wooden arches. Next, they build another platform over the arches. Then they replace the wooden arches and the wooden platform with stone to finish the bridge. The stone bridge will be strong enough to hold a Roman army legion. So they start off with simple wood, and then they create ones made of stone. And some of these are strong enough that they are still around today, or at least remnants of them are. So for thousands of years, it can hold up, and it can hold a Roman legion, a whole group of soldiers. What is that? Lucia asked. It looks like a bridge, but it is so much larger and so high in the air. What is it, grandfather? He's looking at something like this. And these are actually, that's a photograph that was taken in more modern times of these aqueducts. So this is pretty similar. Okay, imagine this whole top section, or the top 2 sections of arches is gone. This is more like what a normal bridge would be. And the aqueducts are taller, higher in the air. See what they are. He says, it is an aqueduct. It carries water from the mountain lakes to the city of Rome. The aqueduct is a great pipe that carries water high over valleys and hillsides. Aqueducts are built like bridges, he says. Arches of stone connect stone support pillars. The great pipe lies on top of the arches, just like the road lies on the arches of the bridges, he continued. The 2 children stared in wonder. That's the end of this chapter. But once again, these are the arches, all made of stone here. If all of this was gone, that would be what a typical Roman bridge would look like. But this one, having 2 pipes, these are pipes at the top, to carry water from one place to another. So in Rome itself, there isn't, in the city of Rome itself, there's not access to as much fresh water. So it'd be piped in from another part of Italy, so that the people in the city, and those are very populated cities, once again, with kind of apartment buildings and everything, they'd have had to have a lot of water for that area. So they took it from the countryside and brought it into the city so that people could have running water in their homes or in the bathhouses. Okay, there are a couple of other resources I'm going to share with you because with this unit especially, it's so good to have visuals. And there are some specific bridges and parts of roads and aqueducts that are still around today. And so I'll have some links to other things for you to watch, some videos to watch, and also some pictures to interact with to be able to see what those look like. So that is all for this video. I hope that you enjoy, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.